announcement and the ISA allowance going up to 15,000 were the really big bunnies that he pulled out of the hat, even though the pensions announcement probably will help the Treasury if people are spending more. And I think it was fairly blatantly aimed at traditional voters who might just be tempted to flirt with Nigel Farage. Certainly his Man of the People Act was more successful than the pasty tax, the caravan tax a few years ago, even that terrible ad notwithstanding on beer and bingo. But he still has a really big deficit. He knows he's not going to clear that, said so quite clearly before the next election. So he's going to have to hope that at least this time next year, he's going to have more to play with to draw more crucial voters in.
Sue, thank you for that analysis. We're joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, Ed Balls. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. It must be harder for you to say that Plan A isn't working, because it clearly is, no matter how steadily, no matter how slowly.
Finally, the economy is growing again. But I think for people across the country, they're told this is good. I think most people are saying we're not feeling a recovery at all. For most people, living standards are still falling. Wages aren't keeping up with prices. It's more expensive to heat your home. It's more expensive to be able to travel. Food prices are higher and people are worse off. And George Osborne promised us 3 or 4 years ago he'd get the deficit down and make people better off.
The deficit is coming down.
Look, the deficit...
And the economy is growing.
The deficit was supposed to be gone by 2015. He had to admit yesterday it will still be there until 2019. I was hoping that at the election the deficit would be gone. It's not going to be gone. It's still very big. And the national debt is rising this year, next year and the year after. We've got a lot more hard work to do to get the deficit down. But we need to make sure we've got an economy which is delivering rising living standards, not falling living standards.
But what's interesting is that you say that you'd hope that deficit would be gone sooner rather than it is. But in fact, a few years ago, you yourselves were saying, actually, you know what, we need to borrow more. We need to try and get the economy going, and getting this huge austerity measures that the Tories want isn't the right way. And now you're saying, actually, the austerity hasn't possibly gone far enough to cut the deficit.
No, look, what I said in 2010 was that if you choked off the recovery, if the economy flatlined, if unemployment was high...
Well, it hasn't, has it? All of those things you predicted that austerity would cause hasn't really happened in the end.
Well, look, out there in the real world, the economy's not grown for 3 years. And people's living standards have fallen year on year. The reason why the deficit's not come down is because the economy's been so bad for the last 3 years. Now, I'm going to agree with you. Finally, after 3 or 4 years, it's starting to grow. Thank goodness. But why isn't it growth, which is delivering rising living standards? Why aren't we getting the investment we need? The budget yesterday, do you know why the economy's growing for the next few years? Because people are saving less every year for the next 5 years. It's based on less saving and more spending. That's not the balanced recovery we were promised.
So, Ed, if you were Chancellor, what would you have done differently?
I would have said, first of all, we've got to act now to help middle and lower income families with a tax cut to help them with their living standards. We'd have got rid of this ridiculous married couples allowance, which doesn't go to most married couples. We'd have a mansion tax on properties over 2 million and use that to cut taxes. We'd have had a freeze on energy prices for 2 years to get energy prices down.
Which when Ed Miliband announced that, the share price of energy companies went through the floor, affecting people's pension pots and savings.
Well, look, it's not surprising that the energy companies don't want the energy prices to be frozen. If the prices can go up and up, they're going up hugely this year, their profits go up. But those profits have been too big, and we've all paid the price. We'd have a bank bonus tax to get young people back to work. We'd have a business investment bank start lending to small businesses. There were lots of things which should be done. George Osborne didn't do any of these things yesterday.
Let's talk about the poorest. The George Osborne's plans to cap welfare spending at £119 billion. It will only increase in line with inflation. If you are in government, what will you do? Will you honour that cap on welfare spending?
Well, look, we'll do things differently and in a fairer way. We'll get rid of...
Will you honour that cap?
But what we will do next week is we'll support that cap. We called for a cap a year ago. We said a cap is a good thing, and we will support the cap next week. We're not against a cap, but within that cap, we'll do things differently. So we'd get rid of the bedroom tax, because we think it's really unfair. So many disabled people being hit so hard. We've set out how we'll pay for that. We've said we would have a guaranteed job for young people, which they'd have to take or lose their benefits. We think that could get the housing benefit bill down. Build affordable homes to get the housing benefit bill done. You can do things differently and in a fairer way, but yes, we will support the cap.
And you would also admit some previous mistakes in bringing back a 10p tax rate, which you originally axed.
Yeah, well, look, we've discussed this before. Getting rid of the 10p tax rate in the late part of the last government was a mistake. We'll put that right. A tax cut for 24 million low and middle income families. I think for most people, looking at the budget yesterday, the reason why it was such an odd budget is he didn't do anything to help ordinary working people.
Well, the personal allowance went up, didn't it?
Well, the personal allowance
before
went
you
up.
start paying tax. So that is something. It's £800 more for people.
It went
in
up a
their
small
pockets.
amount, but people know taxes have gone up 24 times since 2010.
Yeah.
That's massively outweighed by the V. And then we have this incredibly patronising advert from Grant Shapps, which says it's OK because, you know, we'll cut your taxes on bingo and beer and the working people, will be happy. I mean, goodness me.
Okay.
I wonder if the final budget before the general election next year might be slightly different. Thank you very much indeed,
Thank you,
Ed Balls.
Thank you for having me.
Time for the competition.